Us. It's always fun to have people in the audience. Usually we're kind of by ourselves. So we're going to be having a presentation by Nick. And I'm sorry, I'm getting over this head thing. Nick with Quality Inn, with PLK regarding the Quality Insight. Then we will have opportunity for some questions and answers. And then we'll have a presentation from Patrice Burke from Uptown Property Rentals on the Wasson Way project. Also have some opportunity for questions or comments. And then sort of throughout that, Mr. Skelly, Norwood's Economic Development Director, is here, and he can also help answer some questions. We're also trying to get out of here about 7:30 tonight, so I'm going to keep an eye on the time. We do want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to share their thoughts and feelings, but we are also going to try to not belabor it. So I hope folks can be understanding of that. So let's go ahead and get started. Nick, if you would like to start us off.
Yep, no problem. Nick Lingenfelter with PLK Communities. Thank you for the time, and hopefully I did make a minor tweak to what we had presented last time. I think a month or two ago we were here. So if people have seen this already, I apologize, but it's pretty much where we're at the moment. So the site we know is Montgomery and Maple. We're looking at a senior living project. So when we started on this site, there's a couple of different things. One, it is a contaminated site. There is still some limited cleanup remaining, but because of how you would have to reinforce the sidewalk and streets, we haven't taken out the last piece. So that portion of contamination remaining sits actually on city property, not on ours, but we have committed to finish cleaning it up as part of our agreement with the EPA on the site. So when we started looking at this originally, we explored the site. There's kind of step back a little bit. The property obviously was owned by Frisch's. So Frisch's sold the property to a REIT out of Florida. We spent about 2 years working with Frisch's trying to get a solution to what they had. So from a high level, and I'll kind of jump to the image of it real quick. The site here, Frisch's actually was one common property, so they have what's called cross easements. So Frisch's is technically allowed to drive over the entire site right now. Their landlord can dictate that they can drive over the whole site. We can actually build nothing. So we spent about 2 years working with them trying to get those cross easements removed. They have agreed to remove those, but the way we remove them is we have to give them better road access. So when you look at our site plan, they now have the ability to enter and exit on a new road that splits the two properties. This was the only way in which they were willing to do that. If we didn't have that agreement, the footprint was limited to what the Quality Inn's footprint was, which is a little bit of an L shape with the pool, and otherwise they had access to every other point on the site. So best solution was to come up with a way to design that road. That road has been permitted, and we were waiting on a few other utility and infrastructure items before we moved forward with that. So that really kind of put us in a negative spot to begin with. And honestly, when this property first was up here, we didn't want to buy it. The city spoke to us, the Port Authority spoke to us and a few others and said, can you guys please help out because you guys have the money to do it. So we stepped in and bought it. To date, we've incurred about $4.5 million in costs to clean up, remediate, demolish, and acquire the site that we really didn't have a use for. And not meaning that in a bad way, it's just, it's in a neighborhood business district. Office obviously is in a great position right now. What are our other options? The other thing is too, you have to look at the site and say, how does parking work logistically and how do we make the property profitable? It's also got about 14 feet of fallout. So really it becomes a pretty challenging site for the limited number of acres it is. So what we explored was, what are our other options? And one common thing we kept hearing, working at Factory 52, working at a few other sites, how do we have options for people that are retired, that want to stay in the neighborhood or sell their homes or have other options here to be able to stay here that isn't at the same price level as a Factory 52. So we started exploring what other options we have. We've even heard from Factory 52, why don't you guys have an affordable component or something there? Well, that's all dictated by what's called a qualified census tract. So the government dictates where affordable should or should not be. We have no say over that, and honestly, we are not even licensed to build affordable. It's called an IRS 8609 form, which means you've successfully completed a affordable housing project. So You could be building 1,500 to 2,000 units a year like we do, but unfortunately, we're not qualified according to the government. So what we had to do is go out and find a partner who was qualified. So in order to start getting this project going, we interviewed quite a few people, but we have decided to partner with a group called Bergen Health out of Indianapolis. Bergen Health operates in 14 states, has about 25,000 units and $4 billion in assets. Our company is $1.25 billion, $1.5 billion in assets, to give you guys an idea. So they're much larger than we are. But they specialize in this stuff, and they helped us understand what is the best way to do it. So when it comes to like an affordable project, you hear the term Section 8 went away in the 80s, although it's still used today, but there's different tiers or different levels of what affordable means. So you have what's called a 4% tax credit and a 9%. 9% would be what we call your deeply affordable units. That's not what this is. This is something kind of in the middle. And we'll go over incomes, things like that, what a unit costs. But this is really designed to provide what we call, workforce or working class housing. So people that are retired on pensions, people that have worked somewhere in the factories, people that have been a bunch of different places around here that maybe have a fixed income that can't necessarily afford the rents that keep escalating at the new construction, but they want to stay in the community, they want to be a productive member of what we have. What's also nice on an age-restricted project is that we don't need as much parking, which is one of the issues that we ran into given the size of the site. So I kind of walk through, again, where the site is at. We all know this location. And what is it zoned for? So one of the things we step back and says, what can or can't we build at this property? So is a business district zoning, which means residential is allowed. There's no height maximum. We do have a height minimum of 3 stories, minimum to be built here. There's effectively little to no setbacks, and it needs to make sure it fits in with the business district. That's the extent of what the rules are for what needs to be built there. So that's why you really haven't heard about variances or anything for the site, because it is already zoned for what we would like to do here. Next thing we looked up and said, okay, well, how do we figure out how to site is out? I think that's going to get really dried out. So what we've laid out here is kind of 2 L-shaped buildings, and I'll walk through how the design works, what that extension looks like for Crown. But this property itself is fully self-parked. So right now there's about 174 units. Our concept plan we looked at originally was 210. So we're slightly less than we had planned for, but you're more than a 1-to-1 parking ratio. What you'll also notice on the right-hand side, it's a little bit darker color. That's because this is the neighborhood business district, so it has to be designed to look like it fits in a business district. So that is your amenity spaces, gym space, leasing office, things like that are all designed to be there on the main road. So it does not have a true apartment at the street feel. The other thing is, because it's somewhere some of the contamination was located, we actually, even though we're removing it all, we don't want any of that footprint inside of what is the new structure under any circumstance if anybody had a residential unit there. So it really is a protective thing, and it's also designed to meet what the business district does. This site plan has, again, we've permitted the road. We have spoken to the fire department, met with a lot of other groups as well, and we're still somewhat early in the process. So our applications are expected to be, go to the state's website tomorrow, and then we would submit to the state within 30 to 45 days. At that point, we would then hope to be breaking ground 3rd quarter this year. But this is not a competitive application because this is not the deeply affordable bracket of housing. So it's called a non-competitive group. It requires much more give by the development group, which we are a 50-50 development partner on this project. And then it's just a higher level of housing than some of the deeply affordable stuff. So then what we also want to look at is, okay, what was historically there? So we kind of pulled some historic images from down the street, the old fire department's in the middle. Bottom right, I believe, was actually what they said was at the site location at one point, and kind of just give a look of like, what did the neighborhood business district feel like, kind of angled entry on the side where there was the pharmacies, things like that. And the Randolph Pharmacy, I guess, was there at one point as well. So then we say, okay, well, what does that look like? So take that same imagery that you see in a business district. So top middle is actually a project called the Beaker up in Columbus. Same thing, 4% tax credit deal. Top left would be just a nicer brick. How do we make this thing kind of feel like a business district? The other thing is then we kind of look at all the properties around here and say, what other types of materials, what's getting used? So whether it's brick, other types of siding and things like that. So one thing about these is because the government is involved, they are very nice exteriors. They're not kind of cut corners, things like that. They'll be held to a very high standard. So kind of give you an idea if you have the storefront glass on the main road, you keep your residential above or residential on the back. But again, it gives that business district feel. So if you're walking up and down the street, you don't really notice much of a difference. So also what the insides look like. So these are just concept images to give you an idea, but typical nicer finishes for these style of units. And again, we want these to be a long-term asset for the community. So I think when you talk about the difference in affordable, a 9% deal or that deeply affordable deal, usually the developer is not involved. After it's completed, it goes to somebody else. On this type of deal, we don't really make any money. We're putting the land in at cost. We're basically getting our money back. And we then stay involved in the deal. Our partner will act as an operating partner, but then where our eventual payout would come is in 30 years or so when it's completed, once you finish that tax credit cycle is when you actually can get the payment. So a lot of this is not truly about just making profit. It really is about trying to provide the right type of unit and the right look for the neighborhood. Again, for us, we bought it. We feel like this is the right thing to do, and that's why we're putting it there. But we're not making money on the land or anything. We're trying to make sure it gets developed right. So again, high level overview of what it is, 55 plus housing. So this is not families or kids. There's usually restrictions on what can be there. Your grandkids can come stay with you in the summer, things like that, but it is not housing for families. It is, again, 55 plus. 174 units, 2 buildings, 4 stories each. It's roughly 65-35 or 64-36% twos and ones. About a $56 million investment. And then our investment partner would actually be the county. So what happens is on these type of deals, because we don't technically have any cash in the deal, we're contributing it for this investment for them. We again don't make any money until the end, of the county is technically the equity in the deal. So there's also solar components. So when we look at what your total cost is per month, we need to analyze what somebody will actually spend. So it's not just their rent, it's looking at what are the utility bills going to be, and as a net cost to that owner or that renter. So that's what we have to look at. And so we will actually have a pretty big solar component here to help reduce the utility bills each month. And then finally, kind of a breakdown of what the rents are. So there's a lot going on here, but kind of give you 2 different levels. There's the image on the right is a typical 1-bedroom that's in here, and that's about 725 or so square feet. I think it says 709, that's your inside walls. Your other one to the right is your 2-bedroom unit. It's a little over 1,000 square feet. So very good size units for what's in the market. And then the rent average is about $1,200 a month. So anywhere between about $1,000 to $1,100 for a 1-bedroom. And then on your 2 bedrooms is that $1,400 to $1,600 a month. I think what's really important to look at is the line on the right. So someone is 55 plus, how much they make a year, whether that's retirement, Social Security, pension, everything, the income limit. So if they make above that threshold, you don't qualify. It's usually for people on a fixed income. So the average income is about $50,000 per person. Still a solid income, still people that are contributing well to the area. Again, it's not a deeply affordable style unit. It really is retirees. I think my mom was a government employee. She retired. She moved to Phoenix. Her rent tripled during COVID. And this is where we started to realize, like, hey, what's going to happen to all these people that have to rent and have a set number that comes in every month, but they are still contributing to like what's going on in town and are a good part of our community. So we really kind of like this product. We like what it does for people. And it really does give you an option that you don't have to go live in another community. You can stay here. But again, it really is not a super low income. It is more designed for retirees and somebody on pension. So with that, I'll gladly take any questions or hand it over to Patrice and come back.
One question. One question I had, which we were messaging about earlier, was that there are a variety of different levels of affordability within the building.
Correct.
Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, so basically we need to designate so many units depending on what you make. So a 1-bedroom, you'll have 23 units designated. People make around $40,000. You'll have a set number that goes up to 47. So basically, depending on where you're at from an AMI standard, we're making sure we're holding units and not just going for the top portion. It's kind of a blend of people in that range. So again, the average is what's called a 60% AMI, but it goes 50, 60, or 70 depending on your unit type. So again, for a one-bedroom unit, that's something that makes 39 to 55,000 a year. For a two-bedroom, it's 47 to 66. But again, that's a matter of where they're at in that process. Compared to a market rate one-bedroom or two-bedroom, you could be anywhere between $500 and $1,000 a month less than what a market rate is in a new construction project.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Nick, I'm curious.
sorry. Why don't you go ahead and come on?
Oh, I don't
Sure.
want to come up.
Oh, okay. Do you just want to say it loudly?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah. I thought you said these were 3 stories, but yet I saw a screen that said 4 stories.
It's 4 stories. It's a minimum of 3. Zoning requires a minimum of 3 stories.
Mr. Braden?
Sir.
Yeah, Nick, you mentioned part of that site that is city-owned that still needs cleaned up. Can you go back to that and maybe tell me which part that is? I'm just curious.
It's basically under the sidewalk today.
Under the
The
sidewalk.
reason we haven't taken it out is we have to take out the sidewalk.
Okay, I got you. Is
It's
that,
about a 6 foot by 8 foot area.
is that the
roughly.
perimeter or is that just one area?
So if you were doing like a circumference around, it's about 8 foot circle.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So, no, real quick, so if, we only have so many people in our community here. So let's say we've at capacity of our elderly or retired that are that wants to rent this, and you aren't you're not at capacity, but our area is done fill. Is there a backup? Like once you have got to the point where our retirees are moved in and we don't have any more retirees, but you have more apartments left, is there like I don't know, you just go let anybody in there after that? I'm just curious.
It's Hamilton County. So
Okay.
it's for all, it has to be 55, they have to be
Oh, of
55
course.
plus. It's for Hamilton County, but that could be Oakley. It could be anywhere around here that would draw us.
Okay, all right, awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks.
closer for the county.
Appreciate it, thanks.
Are there any other questions? Yes, sir.
So we're just making the bottom look like business? It's just all senior living or affordable housing?
Because of the way these are financed with the government, because the government is the lender, they don't want commercial. Because they would be then responsible for TI if the business went under. There's a lot of other things. They don't want that to drag down the project. They need to know that what they're putting their money into
And
can be
who-
maintained.
Who will manage this property for 30 years?
It'll be our partner version held.
So you guys will not be able to sell it off? Because my concern is that I've owned my house on Maple for 17 years. I got a lot of money in it. I've raised 2 kids. I watched the eyesore fall into what it is now. I watched the prostitution out of there. I watched all. We have affordable housing all up and down the road. Whether people like to believe it or not, we do. It's just a matter of, like the real estate market right now, there are just not enough houses for the number of people who want to be here right now. So that's why the price continues to go up. But 15 years from now, PLK and the other partner, they want to sell it, and it gets into the wrong investor's hands. That's what we dealt with over there. And then it happened over and over, 2 or 3 times after that. You couldn't get in touch with people, the grass was overgrown, and now, I get it, it's gonna be something new. This ain't gonna be for Norwood. This is gonna be for Hamilton County. I know a lot of people get on your guys' page and they're like, we need affordable housing in Norwood. I think they're verbalizing, or saying it wrong. And I don't think they're asking for Section 8. I think they're asking for the real estate market to kind of deflate itself a little bit and get back to prices that we're familiar with 10 and 20 years ago, which probably is not going to happen. But my biggest concern is that affordable housing, which we all know is Section 8, and helping people out, what that looks like 20 years from now, and what that does to the values in this little pocket 20 years from now. I mean, I couldn't sit on my front porch because of what happened to quality and that pool being full of stagnant water. We'd sit in our backyards and have people where we just get annihilated by mosquitoes. There was rat infestations. I just am not a huge fan of, we got Carpenter Flats now. I think originally that was supposed to be 55 and up, correct?
Yes, sir.
It's not,
Yes,
okay?
sir. Yes,
I've been
sir.
in there. It's not 55 and up.
Anything goes.
That's my concern, is that things fall through the cracks and that this affordable housing, when we only have so many plots in Norwood available, and you guys are doing a great job. But we got other investors in here who are doing high-end stuff. Now, maybe if your hands are tied into what you can build on this property, I guess I can kind of understand that. I just don't see this working out good, benefiting the city of Norwood. I don't see these kind of people that move in here frequenting businesses over at Factory 52 or some of these other locations.
What's the
So, can I go ahead and answer that real quick?
Yes, go ahead.
So you have very valid concerns, because obviously, the way the hotel went into a third-party investor's hands, that was a mess. Obviously, we had a mess we were dealing with trying to unwind it, right? I think there's two different things I would look at. First off, from a housing standpoint, this is the government. So they're not going to let just an average investor come in here, or you lose your tax credits, and then they're on the hook, and they can get sued pretty bad because they actually are required to keep it up to a certain standard. So after 30 years, what happens? I can't answer that, but I would say during that compliance period, you're responsible to government, and most people are not going to screw that up. We don't intend to sell it. There's no need to, but if it does happen, I can't promise that 15 years from now. I mean, I'll be 60, so I can't, I get that. I think that the concern though is it's very different when you have a hotel investment versus a residential investment that has the government behind it. It is the government, so there's only how much can but what I would say though is there's not the pool here. There's not a lot of the other things that were kind of the issue, but you do have a valid concern about, you just want to make sure that everything stays on the up and up. What I would say though is, again, my mom meets this demographic, right? She volunteered at Ronald McDonald House. She spends money. She goes to Factory 52. Like, you're still making $50,000 a year, but what they're trying not to do is spend 50 to 75% of your income on your rent. You still want to be able to live the rest of your life. So what we're trying to do is say, I would not say, again, this is not the deeply affordable set where it's like everything's going there. It's kind of that mid-tier of, you can't afford the rent and the new stuff because our cost is so high. How do we make sure there's an option for somebody to have a place to sell your home, put the money in your bank account, and not have to blow through your bank account while you stay in your community, if that's what you want to do. I think there's just a kind of, I agree with what you're saying from a concern standpoint. I think there's two different tiers. Like, this is kind of that mid-tier of, it's not brand new and it's not the deeply affordable. It's kind of something in the middle.
Thank you. Do you have a question, sir?
So, plan originally, if I'm not mistaken, it was what we had back in 52. Wasn't that what the original plan was? Because that's what everyone was told.
No, I would say that we've actually used this image in the middle since day one.
So,
It was to be some time, we were trying to figure out how to do ground
question
floor
is
build.
this. So it's supported over here. It's a good plan, but why isn't that good plan at this location?
Your rent's 10 to 15% less.
Yeah, but
I think I understand his question. I think are you asking why is that not a good location for market rate housing?
Yeah.
Is that your question? Okay. I think he can answer that.
over here. I mean, it's,
I would tell you it's two different renters. It really is. So I would say that Factory 52 is a younger professional that's paying a higher rent per square foot, a higher rent per month. We're seeing that what I would say is this location is just different. So this would either need to be, it would have to almost be geared more towards college students or somebody else, which I don't know if that's the right thing either. But I would tell you that the rent, we've done our market studies. We own a lot of units here. We think it's $200 to $300 a month less than a market rate, which means you're not making any money.
I'm not sure you're understanding his question. I think he wants to know, why is the quality in sight? Why couldn't you do a Factory 52?
That's what I'm saying. You can't afford to build it.
Right. I think part of it is the parking challenge,
You have
correct?
parking and you can't afford to build it. I mean, if we were to do that type of deal with a parking deck, you're $12 million in costs. And you'd have to park 2 to 1. If we were to look at the site, and the site's already a pretty challenging site with what it is and how much it costs to clean it up and get it to where it's at.
you're saying because of the park.
What's that?
You're saying because of the park.
Parking's the major challenge of why you couldn't do market rate, and you're gonna have to build a deck first. And then you come with a parking deck against houses. This is even more challenging.
But you're saying these couldn't be regular houses because they wouldn't sell.
Well, first off, from a sales standpoint, we're not gonna be allowed to, we typically can't sell something that's on a blighted site or had environmental challenges before. There's usually rules against that. So like, that's why we don't have condos for sale at Factory 52, because our agreement with the EPA is never to sell to an individual owner, because if something was missed or something needs to be cleaned up, they want to go after it corporately. So that's why that will never be subdivided into housing. And then we're back to the same question of, do we really want doors or someone's front door opening their business?
No, I guess that's not my So you're gonna charge $1,200 for this.
Mhm.
So anywhere between $1,200 that you got over there, you're making money.
We're not making any money here.
Well, you would be if you raise the rents higher.
Well, I think there's a ceiling to it, so that's the thing, I don't think it's that high.
I don't think it's that much. I think that's great because it's less than a half mile between two locations. Maybe a mile at most. And it doesn't seem like it's factual.
I can tell you what our data says, and I understand that there's a difference of opinion.
I mean, you see these kind of things all over the city, and they're everywhere. They're in all kinds of sections of town. They're putting them up everywhere, just like that center picture, they're like that everywhere. And they're in bad areas, and they're selling.
They're in good areas too.
Yeah, they're in both.
They're on Pleasant Ridge, they're doing right there at County.
Yeah.
They're in Oakley, not the one down the road, they're going like that.
But it's-
They're saying it's the affordable housing, but other locations in the city are doing, gentlemen over here talking about.
Nice business in the bottom, you got a nice, I don't know. It seems like it's up another level, you know? And how many houses does it take? Make a profit.
Once you start going over a certain height, you also run into people who don't want to live. It's just, from a renter demographic standpoint, I understand what you're saying. What I would say is it's much more challenging. The numbers aren't the same.
I would like to get another question in, Mr. Moore, and I do see some other hands out there.
May I ask a couple?
Yes.
So can you, I think you're thinking basically that essentially the city center of Norwood is less desirable than Factory 52, and therefore that's why the rents would be lower here. Is that a correct assessment?
I wouldn't say that, so what I would say is this. Right now, there's more activity at Factory 52.
Sure.
So until the business district has more investment in it, yeah, your difference is there.
Yeah, and I'm not. From your like market comparison studies, can you talk about sort of why the city center of Norwood is less desirable?
It needs more investment.
Investment in what?
And you want to make sure all of that, like your retail storefronts are full, things like that, like it has to be more activity there. So like,
So the lack of storefront activity in the city center is the reason for the depressed rent potential. Is that
I would say that's a large driver of it, yes.
okay? And now we're basically forever locking ourselves into no amenities on the ground level in the center of our city through this development.
On this particular site. What I would say that it's not on your business district, like I saw somebody today working on, there's new construction on a few buildings down there. So what I'd say is that what you don't want to do is continue to create more retail when you have current retail to fill first.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's definitely, within a quarter mile of that site, there's not a lot of people and they get in their car and they drive to other places and all that. So I understand. I'm just trying to clarify. Can you, as far as, by my count, is 123 one bedrooms and 64 two bedrooms. Can you share from your other properties approximately in terms of how many people would you expect to live? Is it 1.5? Is it 1.6? Like how many people per bedroom type would you expect?
I would tell you that we have a couple properties I'd probably compare this to that are better than say others. I would venture to guess it's around 200 to 225 people max
Total? So let's say 1.3
roughly.
people.
Yeah. I'd tell you it's a younger demographic. So if you go to factory, you'll see a lot more people splitting a studio or one that are couples.
Got it.
That's not necessarily going to happen with this group.
With the demographic, you think that across 123 one bedrooms and 64 two bedrooms, that we might have about 220 residents?
Roughly.
Got it. And then just as far as the let's say the stakeholder ecosystem of Burgeon Held, you all, the count, can you just kind of walk me through like who all is at the table and in what roles are they there? Because it seems like there's just a lot of moving parts and kind of a lot of different people.
So I'd say that for this type of transaction, yes, there's a lot of parties at the table. So that's pretty when I say typical, that's what the way a structure normally is. So you have the county is your equity investor because it's really their money that goes to help build these. And then we are 50-50 on the development with Virgin Help. So they will actually run construction, not us. And then they will do the day-to-day operations. We are bringing the property and design work.
And that's it, just those three?
I mean, that's your primary, other than your lenders, so.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And so Virgin Health is the ongoing operator for the next 30 years? And would you guys collectively, if you're 50-50 partners, would you have to like jointly decide to transfer it if it was going to leave your guys' hands, or how would an exit?
I can't tell you exact vote off the top of my head, but all of that stuff has been negotiated. So yes, you would have clauses that say like, if you're short on capital, like all those things you would have in a typical operating agreement. I can't tell you what that vote requirement is off the top of my head.
Got it. But Virgin Health is the construction and ongoing operation, and you guys are the design and build?
We're not building, we're just design, development, and we did the land acquisition and cleanup. So we'll be involved with all the EPA stuff because I'm the one that helped handle all that.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
I saw Ms. Rarica, and then you.
You've mentioned the government several times, being under Admiral Food. Did you say it was county or was it?
Everyone.
You're getting different
So no,
things
so you get money from the county, the state awards the credit, and the federal government is technically your lender.
Is that fun?
This, I don't know if we're using a HUD loan on this one or not. I think it's so I can tell you that the lender's Fifth Third. So they do like a direct, it's called a best loan. So they go straight to the permanent market. So it's a full 30-year amortizing loan as soon as it's completed.
Sure.
Yes, since this is a Norwood project,
Mhm.
do the residents of Norwood kind of get first choice, or when you open it up for lease, anybody in Hamilton County?
So
Kind of first come, first?
from what I would say, yeah, it's a little bit of like, we can say we're going to begin renting, like from a fair housing, there has to be kind of an open, but yeah, I mean, the residents of Norwood would know before we actually listed them. We would, and usually you'd say publicly, we're getting ready to start pre-leasing and take applications or things like that, and the community would hear about it first.
In the back, ma'am.
So kind of building on the gentleman's first questions, I'm wondering, where is the benefit to Norwood with this particular idea? Because you're saying, hey, all of these retired senior citizens have this money. You're saying, oh, 50,000, this represents roughly a third of their income, but if they're largely retired, if they're living on investments or social security, they're not generating income tax in the city of Norwood. It's, they're not property owners, so they're not generating property tax. We've done away with the opportunity to have businesses on that level, so we're not generating any sales tax. So kind of trying to figure out where exactly the benefit to the city is coming. Like, how are we benefiting from this whole situation?
I sort of covered this one. There is property taxes that are paid on it because obviously there's a land basis and that never goes away. There are taxes that are paid from the base level.
Are they being abated?
So there's abatement on the improvements, but not on the original basis. So like if you have land, whatever the cost was today, that stays, that number never goes away. So like that is always paid on every property, whether it's abated or not. And then what you abate is a portion of the improvements. And then it's a 30-year investment. You would have that abatement for your 15-year period. And then 16 through 30, it would continue to accrue. And actually, I think there's a makeup to the schools. There's a few other agreements that we've had on this one to make sure that goes back in. I can't comment on the taxes because I think I don't know if you would get zero income taxes. But there's a couple of things we look at too and say, how do you make homes available for families? So like a lot of people do want to sell their home or don't want to manage a bigger home, but there's not a place to go. And what does that option become? Like you can stay in your house, but then you got, like my mom had 4 kids leave. So where does she go? So she sold her home and rented because it was too much to handle. But at the same time, like you don't want to be taking all that money you took and put it right back into rent. So how do we kind of create both? I would say that and you have a site that we hopefully successfully cleaned up pretty quickly that was pretty blighted beforehand as well. So I think it's fun about this.
Before I take another question, I was wondering, Mr. Skelly, do you want to, is there anything you'd like to add to that
No.
from an economic development perspective?
What are the fundamental things that we
Sorry.
were talking about?
I'm sorry, sir, could you come to the mic for
Sure.
those at home?
Yeah, so we've been discussing what will it have for the benefit for the future. You just heard Nick explain, so hypothetically, you could do the calculation right now, very rudimentary. The property, let's say, was picked up, bought for 1.4 million. You take that, multiply it by 0.35 with a reduction factor, and then if you then further multiply that by 0.06857, the millage, you'll get a rough approximation of what the property is worth from property tax. As you heard with regards to incentives, putting aside the tax credits, there will likely be tax abatements, as you heard from the improvements. So whether that's going to be 20, 25, 30 million, typically anywhere between 74% up to 100% of the value would be abated. Now, beyond that, in terms of earned income, obviously people would be paying that depending on their income. Is there a reduction in terms of what could be if it was a mixed use? Obviously. But at the same time, and again, we have two very large employees of very large development firms. They have to look at the lay of the land, what makes sense right now. You heard about the location, even in terms of behavior patterns. So a lot of people, including myself, they're going to big box retail, they're going to Amazon Prime, and we know what our downtown core looks like. It's a long struggle to entice people, restaurants, retail. As you know, there's a glut of office. So a developer looking to buy and improve here has to essentially balance those risks. What's going to make sense? But right now we know essentially we have a mud lot. You know, it's PLK definitely did the city a solid by buying this, taking down the building, and then getting it ready for redevelopment. And whatever works with regards to the zoning, they're well within their right to ask for relief if they can't make it. Absolutely. But essentially what they're trying to do is make something work for them financially and ultimately work within the communities, both their ordinances and what makes sense here for the people. You know, so I think it's fairly complex. They had to deal with the issue with the road. For me personally, I have some concerns with that because I would rather see a larger parcel, but that was part of the equation legally for them to go through.
Thank you. Sir?
My name's Tom Campbell. I live over at 2032 Maple Avenue. I really don't think the question was ever answered, though. Like, what is the benefit for the city? PLK continues to say that they're doing it for us, but, you know, they're a business. They have to make their money. We all know that, all right? So, but this is a generational problem that we're going to have, all right? If we're not going to develop our Main Street, I mean, I heard Councilmember Moore talk about this, you know, several weeks ago. There's this grand plan that's in place, but does this fit our strategic vision? I really don't think it does, because we keep on talking about people are asking for affordable housing. Are they really asking for this? Everybody that I've talked to is not. And I don't think that there's still too many unknowns here. I mean, nobody's even talked about the public service cost that this potentially is going to have. I just pulled some numbers. National Association of Home Builders, Urban Land Institute, they say that affordable housing, we're talking an 80% AMI, typically has a $4,500 to $6,500 public service cost per unit. This is annual. So you're looking at $880, $100,000. All right, if we're saying $5,000 per unit. All right, with market rate, it's much lower, $3,000, $4,000. So we're still in a hole here. This is going to cost our city a lot. And then if we just kind of take away the income tax base, we're completely eroding our tax base here. We've got, we got,
I don't think that the National Association of Home Builders.
okay, fact checking. All right.
Big fact checks.
So we've got 206, so let's just say 206 residents or so. I mean, basically no income tax. Basically. Very minimal. I would love to hear from council, like, do you guys have a number or anything that we're thinking here for an income tax?
I'm just so my parents just turned 50. They're very young. But I mean, people over 55 are not dead and in the grave. My
Yeah.
grandmother had a part-time job until they moved to Florida to fully retire.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think this will bring in no income tax.
Okay.
I mean, I just want to point, you aren't the only one who's brought that up.
Yeah.
So that's the only reason I'm countering now. Because I don't think people who are 55 and over contribute absolutely nothing to
Yeah.
society. I don't really like.
That's totally fair. I ran those numbers. So if you look at a 56K income, you're looking at around roughly 296K in income taxes brought into the city. Okay. Well, now we go back to, let's go to the Hamilton County median income, which is 85K. Now we're looking at 448,000. This is significantly more. This is going to help any sort of cost that the city is going to have to bear now with this new development. These kind of things are offsetting. I understand, the reason that it makes sense to have 100% residential, have it be affordable. This is creating an instantaneous cash flow opportunity for PLK. And I don't think we can ignore that they're not doing this out of the kindness of their heart. They're a business, okay? So I just really hope that the city, we got to look at, there's so many different numbers here. And just looking at it doesn't, to me, I'm an engineer. I crunch numbers for a living. Crunch the numbers. It's not that complicated. All this information's on HUD, Hamilton County. You can grab it from the federal government, and just the numbers don't check out. And so I hope before we approve anything, we really look at it.
When I think that that's an important thing, we're not approving anything.
Oh, yeah.
Well, no, we don't. We aren't approving anything. They purchased the land,
Yep.
and this is what they are choosing to do with it.
Yes.
That was, and I just also kind of want to mention something that you said, sir. If it were up to me and I were designing Norwood from scratch, it would look very, very different. And that is probably not where I would want to have affordable housing. But Norwood is already developing, changing, shifting. And what we had was a monstrosity for years.
Yeah.
And if nothing else, the flat land is better to look at than what we were looking at for years. And while sort of the other piece is, there's also, we've got Factory 52. Mrs. Burke is going to be speaking shortly about another development on Watson Way. We also have the Sherman Oaks development. So there's going to be some additional housing that's happening. And the developers are, you're absolutely right. They want to make money. We want them to make money because when they make money, typically we make money. So I think that it's important to realize it's not up for us to say, this is what we want in this space. I can share that the mayor did a lot of work in order to bring PLK to the table. And I can appreciate that, yes, they want to make money, but I can also tell you that this was not something that they were really excited about.
Yeah.
And that we are turning that brownfield into housing that I do believe our residents need. I had a neighbor next door. I live in one of the big, stupid Victorian's giant 5-bedroom house, and she lived there. Her husband died a few years ago. Her kids were all grown. She was living in this giant house because she was paying $800 a month in mortgage because she bought it 100 years ago. She had nowhere to go because where are you going to go to rent for $800 a month? And so unfortunately, she did recently die in that home. But if she had been able to move out, that would have allowed that housing, big house, to bring in a family with kids who are going to be paying I think it's important that we acknowledge that this is not binary and that there are lots of different moving pieces. And at some point, we have to make the best choice in the moment. And maybe in 5-10 years, when our corridor is bustling and alive, maybe, and I'm sorry, Mr. Lingenfelter, we had a conversation about what happens after 30 years, that they could say, all right, we did that, now it's no longer affordable, we'll gut it and make it all mixed juice. So, but right now, the numbers aren't giving the developers those choices.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to share.
The last thing I will say, you guys do keep saying that you don't have control. You all do have control over the abatements. You do have the ability to change the ordinance for the CRA. I know that's it's a whole other can of worms right now, but this is in your all's hands. And the residents, I hope people, speak their mind and everything. And I hope you all listen to us. And I hope you all just look at the numbers. Because yes, we're making a decision in the moment that's going to affect generations.
I have a question, sir. So you've made a lot of comments, and I can appreciate them, and they sound very educated. What does, in your opinion, what does work on that site? I'm a little disappointed that it's not I was looking for a mixed development, retail, and I'm a little disappointed looking at the plans, be honest. What does work in your opinion?
Yeah, in my opinion, really what kind of works, and it's tricky, is putting in market rate. Maybe it's not, factory 52 rate, but it's something. The key thing here is getting commercial into that lower level, but you can't do that with affordable housing. I understand that, all right? So this is kind of but the only numbers that really make sense is having 10 to 20% commercial there, and it makes sense. It's the central business district. Yes, residential can be there, but
just to follow up, just top quality development, high quality housing, and nice retail underneath. That's what you're
Absolutely.
proposing here? Yeah,
Absolutely.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
And I understand the laws are the laws, and you can't have affordable housing above commercial. That would be ideal. We can't do that though. But kind of looking at it, you got to have some commercial, because especially if we're going to abate this, having the commercial in there does give the schools some money too. So
Pretty nice comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Moore, and then I'll see you in the back. And I also just want to pay attention to the time, so I want to make sure everyone gets their questions answered, but.
Sure, yeah, and there's certainly I understand the problem that the site was before, and needing certain people to do that. And I would be interested, Nick, if you could comment, because I heard a couple of comments that no cash in the deal, we're not making any money on this, things like that. Can you walk us through that?
Yes, so the city and port asked us to buy this. So Peter personally funded this. Peter personally funded the demolition. He personally funded all the environmental remediation. We have yet to receive $1. And you can ask the school board for their notes, ask anyone when we negotiated it. We were very clear, we didn't want this property. Don't want it. We have our hands full down the street. We need to put our money down there. So we spent about $4.5 to $5 million to date, which has accrued no interest, which has had no return. I believe Mr. Scully can probably talk about this. They've talked to a medical group. They've talked to a lot of different things. And I want to go back to the idea about commercial. So let's think about what the payrolls are here. So if there's 225 people that work there, an average income of $50,000, that's $11.2 million in payroll. Now let's put that in context of what a company is, right? So 225 times 50, 11.25. Average payroll company is $75,000 on average, say if that's what you make today. That means that would have to be a business that employed 150 employees right now to cover the same amount of payroll. So to sit there and say that we're not creating something do we want fast food? Because that's the only other option. We can go get a new fast food restaurant, but I don't think that's what anybody wants either. So I think if what we're looking at is saying, how do you activate the business district? It's more people walking around. It's more people that are here in general. And I think that it's, as much as I understand the desire to have retail there, new construction retail, I need to charge you $25 to $30 a foot, plus your taxes, plus everything else. So who can actually afford to operate in that? And then what you have to look at and say, Mr. Developer, I want 10,000 square foot of retail. They need $200 a foot. Can you also fund another $2 million to build out their space? they can't afford the build out. So we're in an environment right now where it's like we are not going to continue to kind of put stuff in if there's not somebody there. And that's why you go to other cities and you see the ground floor retail and new construction empty, because it's too much. Yeah. What we have to do is focus on the retail we have. Like if the storefront down the street is rehabbed, they can charge a third of what I can in rent because they've got a structure that already exists, where I've got to build it new and now I've got to charge that retail tenant for it. So what we should do is be focusing our money in those older spaces that can get that turnaround that we need, and then kind of put the housing around it. As much as that's not the most ideal situation, yes, we're a business and yes, we want to make a profit, but no, we are not making a profit here. At this point, we've carried the land long enough and we need an option of what we're going to do with it, and letting it sit idle for another 3 to 5 years doesn't do anybody any good. And it already exceeded what we had didn't want to buy to begin with. So I think that it really does feel like the right solution. If we could make money at market rate, trust me, we would do it. It's not there. And I would love for it to be there, but it's not. And if somebody wants to pay us $5 million, you can have the land. We're done. Like what I'm trying to figure out right now is how else we move it forward. I want to also comment about what Ms. Hoover said before as well. This has no variances. It can be permitted as it sits, and we've already negotiated all agreements with the schools. So at this point, if this plan doesn't work, we just sit on it and we just wait till somebody can come buy it. But there's not a lot of other options for what the site is today, because if we could make money, we would have by now.
Thank you. I know you in the back, sir.
Yes, ma'am. I'm curious. I've lived here 34 years. With your studies, did you see how many retirees would move to Norwood, or is that just you assume that it will?
No.
Because considering our infrastructure right now, Norwood is not the ideal place to retire. I mean, the streets are crumbling.
We're working on it.
No, well, I've lived here 34 years, and I have yet to see very little improvement except Smith Road. That's the only improvement I've seen, okay? Now, my other question is, if you didn't want to buy it, why buy it? Does that mean we just have to accept affordable housing? Excuse me. I don't think, I would rather be a green spot, a park, rather than affordable housing, because there's nothing here that's going to attract retirees. We have fast food restaurants. We have, 52, yeah, factory 52 is great. But west side here, there's nothing to attract people. So, I maybe it's talking to an old man standing.
No.
But
Yeah.
I don't see any benefit to Norwood for that. That's just my opinion. And so, I just don't see any opinion, I don't see any improvement for that, personally. You're not gonna, I'll quite.
Thank you. Well, I did full market studies, like all of that's done. So like there's a full market study that's been done, glad to share with the city, that talk about the demographics, how it pulls in. You go through this process, our partner will spend almost $1 million to get the approvals. So all of that stuff is backed up with the data they're doing to do that. So we're not, but I would say that gladly share the demographic studies with you. Valid argument. What I would say though is, because you look at other areas like in Oakley or somewhere else where they have to buy market rate, it doesn't work. It gets so expensive, you have to be within a qualified tract. So,
but then you look up Pleasant Ridge, going down Montgomery Road. That's vibrant. I was just up here today. There are people walking around in and out of the shops. And as far as Norwood retirees most of them move out of the city. Most of them don't stay.
Why?
I beg your pardon?
I was going to say why. There's not a lot of places for them to go.
It's not, they just don't, they move. They don't like what's left. I know firemen, I know policemen that move. A lot of our firemen and policemen don't even live in Norwood. So to say that the retirees are going to have first choice on this, I don't know. Like I said, this is just me talking from a gut feeling. But to me, that's not going to benefit us.
Thank you. I did see a few more questions, Bowl. Oh my goodness.
Go ahead, sir.
for a while.
I'm sorry.
My question is probably really more for council. And I heard us say that we heard from people from Factory 52 about what should be done there, that we talked to other organizations about what should be done there. But I don't know that anybody talked to us, to this group of people. And maybe I missed a survey or a focus group or a meeting, and I may have. I try to keep up on things, but maybe I missed it. But I don't know that anybody talked to the people that live immediately there about what would be beneficial or what we would like. And I understand all of the, once they own it, and I get all of that. And I don't know if we can do anything about it at this point, but if we'd gone back to the beginning, did we talk to anybody other than Factory 52? And I don't even know who the other organizations are, but I know I wasn't asked. Not that my asking is everything, but I know that nobody I know of.
I would say that was a decision made by administration. That was not made by council. So that would be, I guess, the mayor. Yes.
So, we have the Montgomery Road plan, which has been taking forever to get together. And we're going to have a lot of trees down Montgomery Road. And I guess that would be finished in 2 years, is that right? That's about to take place. So, my thing is it's one valuation now. It's going to be, the site will be a completely different valuation, much more attractive once the plan is executed. So, by rushing this and creating a sense of urgency, we're really keeping ourselves here instead of, the Montgomery Road plan, there was a lot of back and forth about it, but it is going to be better. And, one of the things that used to make Montgomery Road kind of fun, even though it was a little gritty, was we had a lot of small things, like we had Bluebird Cafe and H&H and little bar here and little used furniture stores and guitar store. And, it was just funky and fun. And so, how do we get that? I think Nick is correct in that we need to build those smaller spaces that are cheaper. But what about affordable retail, But I really think we're selling ourselves short if we're not building something that's appropriate for the new version of Montgomery Road. And I can appreciate everything Nick said, but, we heard a lot of things about Factory 52, they changed, we don't have office. Maybe if we had the office over there, we'd be feeling more amenable, but I just don't feel like this is what we need, given our financial situation.
Thank
My
you.
thing is, I want to see office on top, retail on the bottom. Maybe some residential somewhere, but I'm about, today I drove down Montgomery Road Edwards, and I saw all our nice office towers at Norwood, and they just thought, man, this looks fantastic. This is like a little cluster. This could be anywhere. This could be Chicago. And I thought, why can't we have that over here? Because, what was over there wasn't great once upon a time. So.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Two quick questions. Nick, you mentioned it's 55. Is that just 55 on the lease? Is there an occupancy restriction? Like, what's the mechanism there in terms of who can actually live in that building?
So your primary, it must be somebody that's 55 plus as the primary renter. To that point, usually there's some type of restriction that the children are there for longer than a certain period of time. And then in some situations, they do allow adult children if they're handicapped as well.
Other question is, are there similar buildings that the companies have built in other areas around Cincinnati that you could name for us or point us to so that we can kind of see what impact that's had on those neighborhoods?
One of their projects we're counting up for, but it's looked at market rate, and then the newer stuff is all in the most of the affordable developers can probably help us.
I've been in that building in County Manafort, and they have these long hallways that are very narrow and kind of creepy.
That's on 4th Street.
Across the road.
All right, Ms. Daniels, and then I would really like to be able to allow Mrs. Burke to speak.
I just wanted to ask you about the parking. Are you going to have parking garage or are they going to park?
There's surface parking, so there's one-to-one, there's the two, we have 175 parking spaces on all.
Ms. Hoover,
Yeah.
before we move on, I'd like to make a statement.
Sure.
Yeah, I just want to say, Nick, you've been, last few times that you've been here, I feel like you haven't been appreciated. And I just want to take this time to tell you that I appreciate what you did over here, what PLK has done, what you've done over there, everything you've done. I want to make sure I feel like that you haven't been appreciated here, and I'm a little, I just feel a little, I don't know, type of way that maybe you might feel as well. So I just want to take this time to tell you thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for what you did there. Everything top notch, and we appreciate you. So I just want to make sure that we get that out there. Thanks.
I think what I'd like to do is go ahead. If anyone has any additional questions, please feel free to email me and I'll make sure you get your question answered. It's, what's my email? shoover@norwoodohio.gov. Because I do want to make sure that Ms. Burke gets a chance to show the Watson Way development. And I do appreciate everyone's comments and concerns.
Can I say one last thing?
Sure.
So we're going to create a pattern here, because we do have a couple more sites in Norwood that are contaminated, right? We got Romeo Box, and we got Perry and Derrick.
So that is owned by the port right now, Perry and Derrick?
But nonetheless, we can end up with more affordable housing.
No.
No?
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is that a hard no?
It's not a hard no, it's that right now, that development is miles away from anything. So what my hope is, and I think that this is sort of the frustration that folks in this room is, and you're not gonna like this, the city does not have a master plan. And so,
Qualified for affordable housing and other places aren't. That means we're already earmarked for affordable housing.
not every tract in Norwood, actually, there's, if you put,
It's called a UCC map, so it qualifies, so that's this track picture of the map. Okay, when you cross the other side, Montgomery's not.
I'd be happy to talk to you later, because I think that's a really good
Same
question.
climate justice now.
No, you can do it, it's demographic is the main group, I can get to.
Okay.
All right, I am going to go ahead and have Watson Way, but again, and I think that's a good question, and I think that's maybe a conversation actually for committee of the whole, about what is our overarching plan. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to get my son.
Thanks, Nick.
At least you know what they.
Clarify why they set up 30 seconds.
Yeah.
I think absolutely is part of housing. Absolutely, people are aging out of their very large homes, this thing a lot of maintenance. And this is great, this is something we use, this is something we're looking for the future. But my concern is that by saying it's only affordable housing versus mixed housing. I understand it cannot be mixed residential and commercial. But by locking into only affordable housing, are we missing opportunities for people that want to come to the city? Because we've always expected that this is Montgomery Road is being, we're Boston ways, so we have all these great minutes. Are we keeping ourselves in risk by locking into only, or is it something really mixed? A mixed use, and like X number of units, or X number of units on market grid. Because we actually do need that. We actually do need affordable housing. But how do we marry the idea of affordability for our seniors and income generation for the city? That's my point.
Different tax deal to make it profitable.
What's also different leasing teams, so like you have your board leasing team, the lunch rate leasing team, actually have legal questions. So it's definitely, it's not as easy as, we would love to figure that out, and the Port Authority's trying to figure it out, it is not the easiest thing to do. I'm not finding costs, it really is really interesting. How do you manage that, how to payroll, and I don't know.
I can share real quick. I was at a housing meeting in Hamilton County, I think 2 years ago, and they had that they had a big conversation about that kind of mixed affordability. And when you put in all the numbers into the graph, it was crazy how the numbers didn't work. But I can tell you that that is something that people smarter than me are looking into, but that I'm not sure of any local development that's been able to figure it out. But I think it's a great idea. So you figure it out and let us know how to do it. Ms. Burke.
First, I misunderstood this format a little bit, so I apologize for not having AV, and I'm going to turn my back on you all a little bit since you have the handouts and just kind of speak to the crowd here. So, hello. Hello. We are not talking about an affordable housing project on the Wasson Way. So, first let me introduce myself. My name is Patrice Burke, and I work for Uptown Rental Properties. If you know Uptown, we're a local company, family-owned business. We've been in business since the mid-'80s. You may know us or think about us as a student housing developer because we have a lot of property around the University of Cincinnati, and you might see our blue oval around there. We have about 4,000 units, though, in the area, and we have about half student housing and half conventional. So the project that we're going to talk about tonight is not a student housing project, even though it's adjacent to Xavier University. So I just want to kind of make that clear, and I'll talk about a little bit what that means. So the site, which I'm going to hold up the site plan, again, not understanding the assignment very well. This is the site plan. I think since you live in Norwood, you know the site that we're talking about. So it is adjacent to the Wasson Way on Montgomery and Lexington, right across from Stones. It is a huge vacant lot that goes all the way from Montgomery to Regent, where School Outfitters is. We are not using that entire site. So the Joseph family owns that land. And this is kind of an interesting evolution of how community engagement kind of informs development. So the Joseph family bought that, I don't know, 8 or 9 years ago, and kind of before the Wasson Way came about. And in about 2020, 2021, they tried to put their Volkswagen dealership there. And the community was not having it. So they put that plan to rest, and they're kind of, I believe what they're doing is going to reinvest in their dealership where it is. But meanwhile, that land has just sort of sat fallow since Duke. There was a Duke parking lot that's serves the Duke facility across the way. So it's really just becomes kind of this overgrown, blighted property. One of the parking lots closest to School Outfitters was serving School Outfitters for a while, but really for the past few years, it's really just been kind of parking for the Wasson Way. So we met with the Josephs about how we could potentially activate this site, and we're apartment developers. So we wanted to see how much housing we could do here and so kind of how it would make sense in Norwood. We've never built anything in Norwood. We've owned property here over the years, but we've never built anything. So this was kind of a new process for us and getting to know Norwood process, Norwood people. We had some engagement sessions with the people who live directly kind of adjacent to the site. And then as we've been working through our permitting and everything with the city, it's kind of, the plan has sort of taken shape. So the plan is, and again, I'm going to just hold this up real quick because we're not using all the site. So there's about 1.5 acres that will remain, which is close to School Outfitters. We are using from Lexington over 4.5 acres. And the site is completely fenced right now, and we started construction. So when you go there now, you'll see a big flat site, and you'll see it fenced, and you'll get an idea of the exact geometry. There are going to be 2 buildings there with 205 units total. So the first building, we started construction, like I said. They'll go up, we'll pour the pads for each, we'll start framing, they're gonna kind of come up together, but the one that's closest to Montgomery will open first in May of next year. And then the next building we'll start moving people into like in the fall. It is a mix of studio, 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments. And I mentioned student housing before. So we do a lot of student housing. Student housing has become kind of big units of, 3, 4, 5-bedroom units that is leased on a very specific school year calendar. So it's 12-month lease, but it starts August 15th and runs through July 31st. These are not that. We anticipate that some students will live here, and it's free country. You can rent an apartment if you're a student, but it's not the same as having like a dedicated student housing, like the development across the street, for example. We recently completed a project really similar to this in Florence, Kentucky, which is a little bit of a comp to this as far as like who we think might live here. And it's really an interesting, and we also have just opened a couple of buildings in Mount Auburn near Christ Hospital, which maybe not be a comp as far as like who might live here. You don't know who's going to live here. But like I said, there's studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms. There's some 1 bedrooms with den, 2 bedrooms with den. And we found that our average renter is in their low 30s. They're making $70,000 a year about is what we average. We think that the Xavier Medical School, which was announced after we had started planning this, is a really neat addition to the neighborhood, but also definitely a potential renter for us. We have a building right now in Mount Auburn right next to Christ Hospital, and we get a really strong medical resident who rents there, for the 2 or 3 years that they're in residency, and then they leave, and they're a great tenant. They're a good citizen. So we have 1 retail space that's facing Montgomery. It's 1,100 feet. I'll point to these in a minute, but I just want to sort of talk through this. Our leasing office is also in Montgomery, so it's a commercial space. The parking, the buildings are completely oriented towards the Wasson Way. I haven't even used those words yet, Wasson Way, but really the cool, appealing thing about this site, one of them is that it's directly adjacent to the Wasson Way, which is just this huge amenity running right through your community. And I do think that's just going to get better and better. And we've kind of seen it even in the Uptown as it kind of comes through Avondale. It really is a great connector. This portion of the Wasson Way is really pedestrian heavy, we found out. So a lot of runners and walkers more than bikers on this particular stretch of the trail. But it is a huge amenity to Norwood. It's a huge amenity to our residents. So when we think about putting people here and what they might want to do, we're thinking the amenity here is the trail. So in the building itself, there will be a swimming pool that's between the 2 buildings. There's a big gym because we anticipate having like a pretty active renter here, and a club room. And then like I said, the small retail space in the front. And then there's the trail, which is just an amazing thing. And we cited these buildings to sit on the Wasson Way and not on Lexington. It's kind of an interesting development site because it's just this really long rectangle. So there was really only so many ways to put this apartment building. And we have an L shape on Montgomery because obviously you have to face the road. It's important to have that street frontage to activate Montgomery. But then as we were looking at Lexington or Wasson Way, it just made a lot more sense to put the buildings and the people on the trail and the cars behind. And there is kind of a grade change between Wasson Way and Lexington. So there's a nice landscape buffer that will be all the way along Lexington with a fence, with a nice aluminum fence, and then the parking is kind of behind the buildings. So we're very excited about that. We're excited that we were able to embrace what we think is just a great amenity in the community. Let me think. Those are kind of the basics. 205 units. Well, I'm sorry.
I saw the planning commission where the fire chief was, and you guys were deciding about the address.
Yeah.
So the address is actually going to be on Lexington, right?
Right.
Because that's how they have the access. So is that where the front door is? Or do you have a kind of a door like a... So
we have a front door to the retail space that's on Montgomery, and the retail space that will have a Montgomery address. The front door to the leasing office will be really off the parking lot on Lexington. So if I'm coming there, picture yourself either walking or driving there for the first time. You're going into the parking lot and then you're following the signs to the front door. So if you come from Montgomery, there's a walkway that goes right next to the building. Yeah, this is Montgomery. So it's both Montgomery. This is looking south. So this is our leasing office, and that's Lexington. This is Stones. This is Lexington. You're coming this way. And then this is across the street, University of Chasing looking south, and this is the Wasson Way. these are sketchy renderings. We're kind of fully developing what the materials, everything are gonna be, but the Lost Way is right here. And then, look, we have a nice landscape buffer. We're following the Montgomery Avenue plan. And there'll be a really nice landscape buffer actually around the entire site. It's gonna be really pretty. Because Watson Way actually has a really nice landscape plan as well. So I can answer questions. I probably forgot some things, so.
So all traffic's coming in through Montgomery Road, or they just set up fence all Lexington?
No, there's, all traffic's coming from Lexington.
Oh, so.
Yeah, there's 2 curb cuts. I'm just saying, there's also, where there's not curb cuts, there's a nice fence and landscape buffer.
What will the people on the Lexington's houses there, what will they be looking at? Parking lot or?
They'll be looking at, it sort of depends because they're a little bit set back from the road. So their vantage is probably, it kind of depends, but they'll be seeing the landscape and the cars and the building because it's so tight. You know, it's just not a very deep site.
Is there a plan to landscape along Lexington as well?
Yes, and actually, so in one of our engagement sessions, we talked about how Norwood's trying to do some more street trees, and that's a really important thing that we also do. We've planted a ton of trees around the area, so there'll be some street trees in the tree wells.
Thank you.
One question I got. So she can do this, this location. I can't do that.
This is a lot more land, and I don't know what their pro forma looks like as compared with what our pro forma looks like. This is a lot more land, and it's a lot more units. It's 205 units. There's no structured parking by design. At one point, we looked at having some structured parking here. Besides the cost of it, though, it would just not be right here.
More parking lot in the central business district. It just doesn't make sense. But no, it's beautiful. Good for you guys.
We're excited. I mean, we've already started, like I said, and you've probably seen it because you live here and you drive by or walk by. But it's going to start going very quickly. So we'll start framing, we'll be under roof, by the end of the summer, and then we'll start moving people in next year. And one thing I wanted to say too, and I see some hands, but, so I mentioned that we're a family-owned business. We're also a long-term holder. So we own our properties, we own properties that we bought in 1985. And every single property that we built and developed, our large-scale stuff, we continue to own. So that's important for us. We have on-site management. We really, feel strongly about like hiring local talent. So all of our consultants, the architects, the engineers, our contractor they're Cincinnati companies. They're not necessarily Norwood based, but they're Cincinnati companies. They're local to the region, and our subcontractors are local too. We're not bringing in, there's one subcontractor that's like a geo-peer guy that only operates out of a different state. So, but everyone else we hire locally, and we think that's really important for the temporary construction jobs, which, are not temporary to those people, right? It's their job all the time. But for the way people count job creation, it's temporary construction jobs and then full-time employment. So we'll have 4 or 5 people who work here all the time, but we've created hundreds of construction jobs in the meantime.
I just had a quick question about the lighting with the traffic light with the turn from Lexington. I know it's not too far from that to then the Watson Way. I was wondering if there is a plan to do like coordinated lights or what the pedestrian safety is for that.
So they're adding, you probably know this, and this might be what you're referring to. They're adding the light at the Watson Way, similar to the Montgomery one. And there's no light at the Lexington exit. And part of that was because that would be too many lights. And it would really not help with the traffic flow, which is important to get, people in and out. So I'm not sure how they're going to time those lights. I was starting to talk to DOTE about in Cincinnati, about the connection to the Watson Way. And they would be who would be coordinating at least those lights on the south side of Montgomery.
Thank you.
You know what kind of retail space that you're looking at?
It's going to have to be someone who is going to operate mostly pedestrian-focused retail. So, and it could be seasonal. It could be, we've started talking to the Watson Way about potentially using that either, you know, if you have a 5K there or something, as a way that they could have like a rest spot or something. But I'm not really sure who we're going to actually get.
Ms. Burke,
Yes,
the Volkswagen Group owns this property, and you guys are developing it.
that's right.
Is there a lease agreement between the two?
So they contributed the land. They're our development partner now. So they contributed the land. So we co-own the land now as of last Friday.
Okay, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Is there any plans to, I know you said it was just housing and there's a pool. You're going to leave the parking space. Is there any plans to draw from Walson Way? I mean, what type of buffer and transition is there from Walson Way? Just curious.
It's very close. It's really close to the trail. There's like a little gully out from the trail to the site, and then there's a landscape buffer, and then our building is sitting right there. And we have 3 connection points for people to come between the Wasson Way and there. And then the remainder of the site, there's an acre and a half left of the remainder of the site. I don't think there's any connection points there because it still has a fence around it.
Hi. Thanks for being here and for helping make this not a car dealership. So if I'm looking at the site plan diagram, and I don't know if you have that one.
I do.
Can you help me? So you said, I think, May 2026 for the western, closest to Montgomery part?
Yes.
Where, because you said it's 2 buildings, right?
It's 2 buildings.
Where is the break? Is it sort of
At
to
the
the right
pool.
of the amenity space?
Yes.
Is phase 2, we'll call it? What's the proposed opening date for that?
October of 2026.
October 26?
Yeah.
Okay.
It will really be only phased from a leasing standpoint. It's not going to look that much further behind the other building.
Got it. Okay. That makes sense. And then am I seeing this right that basically, I think I see dog park, that basically everything kind of up and to the right of that are maybe 3 rows of parking until you get to the property line?
That's right.
Okay. And who owns the 1.57 acres remaining?
The Joseph Group.
Okay, they still own
They
that?
still own that.
Do you have any breaking news as far as intentions for that 1.5 acres?
Well, I would love to develop that into more housing,
Got it. Would that,
but I have no right to do that. Let me just be clear. They own that.
okay. With regard to, you mentioned 3 access points. I'm guessing one of those is the retail on the, let's say, southwest corner of the property. Where are the other 2?
The other 2 are at the dog park and at the first building from the club room, access from the club room.
Sorry. The club room is the amenity space?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll show you if you want to mark it up. I can come over there.
That's all right. I got it. Okay. One request, and I don't know how often we'll do this again. So right now, both renderings are from the western boundary of the property. One from the southwest, one from the northwest, looking essentially across Montgomery in both cases. I think something that I have heard from people as far as, let's say, this Norwood stretch of Wasson Way is, just that it's not the Hyde Park stretch of Wasson Way in the sense of the trees and all this kind of stuff. Something that I think would be interesting, though, is sort of what is the view from the southeast corner of the property line, sort of looking, because in a lot of ways that might be somebody who's coming west from Oakley, from Hyde Park, coming west past School Outfitters, kind of what's that user experience like? What do they see? And I can sort of imagine from this rendering, but I think appreciably understanding that would be helpful in assessing what we have here. And then I guess just my last comment is that, I think to your point about the College of Osteopathic Medicine, this property, whatever ends up happening on the Family Dollar parcel, that 13 acres there, I think there's a lot of, similar to the conversation we had about the city center, there's the potential for a lot of new foot traffic in that area, which right now, it's amazing in Cincinnati if a Grader's and a Skyline go out of business, on the same block. So I think that there's probably like something sort of fundamentally wrong with the number of people that are there. And so I'm hopeful in the sense of more year-round human activity within that corridor. So thank you for being here and answering those questions.
Yeah, thank you. And we want to have vibrant retail. To your point, it is very hard to support vibrant retail. You need a lot of people and they actually have to go to those places. And so I think as we build more critical mass and as Norwood continues to grow, there'll be more opportunities for better retail. I would say too that, you know, we want to continue to work with Norwood throughout this process. Lexington is very poorly paved. And so it would be great to be able to figure that out, to get that repaved. We'd like to talk about gateway signage or tree cover, things like that, that can really add to the neighborhood.
I'm sorry, Patrice.
Yes.
Sorry, just to the question, and I can't remember. Hello. You asked about being engaged in the process as it pertains to the quality insight. To what extent have you all had, let's say, focus groups or engagements with those Lexington residents? Mr. Speed, I know, is involved down there, such that they've had a chance to weigh in on light pollution, dump trucks coming to empty, industrial containers, the hours restrictions on when they can do that, just things like that.
So we had one session at Dana Gardens that was very well attended by people who lived on Lexington, people from Xavier, some people from Dana, which is in Cincinnati, but about a lot of those things. At Planning Commission, we had the opportunity to talk about the trash because there's a compactor, and there was some residents there that were asking about some specifics about that. I've had a lot of phone calls with people who got our outreach. I sent a postcard to people letting them know that we were having a meeting and giving them my number. So I've had quite a few phone calls from different people who are just kind of wondering what's going on. That's been very helpful. And I think as it continues to take shape, we'll continue to kind of answer those questions.
Thank you.
You had a question, sir.
Yeah, right now there's some parking for Watson Way. Have you put anything in for that?
No. I'm not sure how that parking even got there. But you're right. That was a hard day for people when we put that fence up. I know, because there was a lot of people trying to get in there. I think what I've seen people do is they've gone down to the end of Lexington at Regent and they're accessing it that way. So, but there won't be public parking on the site for Wasson Way.
And along with your comment about Lexington and the pavement, and this is probably a city question. I go up and down that street every day, and yes.
It's shocking.
It got really bad with Duke and all their trucks, and it has just continued to get worse. So if the city could do anything, because this is, it's be a really nice addition to the city and a nice smooth street.
I think we can work. It's a really big priority for us too. And we're hot patching it now. If you go up there, it's not all graded out though. So it's a little rough. Yeah.
Even if there's no.
It's hard to even patch that because it's kind of one giant.
And as we put in our utilities, we'll improve some of that. It will be improved at the end for sure. I would like to have the whole thing completely improved, but it is public infrastructure, so.
Ms. Burke?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just to follow up on a gentleman's question, are there any plans for TIF in the area?
That's a Norwood question.
Okay. I would imagine if they do a development of this stature, that we would appropriate the streets. I would imagine that would be the next step for us. But a TIF would be something that would be, just comes to mind, that would help that area redevelop with the development itself. Yeah, anyway, thanks.
Do you have any other questions for the Wasson Way development?
Nick said that if anyone had 5 million.
Good question.
Maybe.
Way to go.
I don't know.
Good question. Good question.
Ms. Burke?
Yes.
What's the total number of parking spots?
240.
The big trees in the parking.
Yes, Norwood is very specific about the parking lot. Sorry. Yes, there will be trees. They have a very specific landscape plan for parking lots. It's actually really helpful. Trees and there's like 2 shrubs for every, and a tree for every island. And there's landscape islands every 15 spaces.
And are you guys going to use those tree cells, cages that are really turning out to be really successful? It's like, what it does is it shields the root ball and you get that gravel and then.
Oh, you mean the grates? Like I don't know. Well, we should talk about it. Yes.
Will there be parking for a full spot?
There'll be a minimal amount of parking for the commercial spot. Mostly probably mostly probably for their employees and like if you're doing like a grab and go situation. Yes.
This might be for you guys. Are these sites, when they get developed, do we have a runoff? Or is it all gonna go into our sewer system? Like some of these areas, you go out to like Westchester and everything, and every location has like catch basins or whatever you call them, like they're almost like makeshift ponds. Because we seem to have a problem with water in this area.
I can answer that.
I would assume that they would fix that with the infrastructure. I mean, that would be addressed during this, when you get your permits and things like that. I would assume that would be addressed.
That was like one of my biggest concerns going back to when my house was away from a lot. I've already experienced 2 floods in my basement in the last 3 weeks. From all the lovely infrastructure that we got with sewers and stuff and brand new furnace, brand new stuff pump. We needed money here. So yes, that was like my biggest concern is with all these developments, what happened, are sharing the, like.
So this has a huge underground detention tank underneath the parking lot. Its size, so MSD, this is interesting because it's so close to Cincinnati and there's some redundancies and overlap between agencies. So MSD is Hamilton County anyway, but so MSD is involved here, Norwood Water is involved. We follow some Cincinnati DOT specifications for certain things, but we follow the MSD guidelines for, you used to size detention for a 100-year storm. We can't do that anymore. So now you're sizing for a 10-year storm because weather has just become so unpredictable. And it's also at a 5-minute, a 10-minute outflow. So the idea is like everything, so all of our buildings have gutters, downspouts, and everything that feed underground into this tank. The tank, I don't know exactly the capacity, but I mean, it's probably 120 feet long by,
I can barely hear. Did she say there's a tank there now?
yeah, there's an underground detention tank.
Okay,
It's really large. It's sized, it's oversized.
Okay.
Per like MSD regulations. So, and it outflows at a slower rate. So we had it, to outflow at a certain rate there, we're kind of reducing that to make it flow. And then it does go into the public infrastructure in the street. It's like everything in this region, almost, it's a combined system. So your sanitary and storm are combined. And it goes into that system which can handle it kind of downstream. You had one you had?
Patrice?
Yes.
I'll ask another one, if I may. So just curious, the 205 units, the 240 parking spots, how did you arrive at the 240 number?
So the way the site plan is, you can tell that we have a surface parking lot on the side of the building. Mm-hmm. So we did not feel comfortable with the amount of spaces that could just fit behind it, even though we did not want to have like an exposed parking lot. But parking and people driving is just a reality. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of data from our other conventional properties about how many cars people have, and we try to back into that number. But I'll tell you, it's a moving target. In a good way, actually.
Got it. And then the currently, let's call it, I don't know, 15 feet, 20 feet south of Lexington, there's a metro stop. How will that be affected, if at all?
So we're moving it during construction. So I think like next week, it's going to move more in front of Stones,
Okay.
which is very close to another stop. But we're working with Metro right now on if it's going to permanently live there or what. And also when they do the final construction on Montgomery too, they're going to look at that.
Will you be putting charging stations in for like?
We will. We'll have probably, I think we have sized for 8 double-headed chargers right now, which is about what we've been doing, and they get faster and faster, so it's pretty efficient. We've definitely seen that at our other properties. There's a real need for it.
I had a question for council. Will there be a part 2, another meeting? I think people are coming with like Nick bringing back. I think people appreciate the open dialogue. That way, if we have questions, ask it early in response. And then if anyone has more questions, whatever. But will there be another discussion? Will there be?
I mean, I'm happy to hold another meeting if Mrs. Burke would like to come back. Or are you thinking specifically for the Wasson Way project or for Quality Inn or?
No, the quality. I had more to say and more to ask and actually have the results for a survey that we did. So I was gonna. But it's like 7:30.
I can look into that for you. How about that?
What's up?
Where does the water go?
Do you mean the stormwater? So it gets collected on the roof or in the parking lot. If it gets collected on the roof, it goes to the gutters and they go down and it connects directly underground. So there's a pipe from that gutter underground. And in the parking lot, you'll see like a grate and that water goes to that same pipe. And it's all collecting it in this huge tank that's about the size of this room. And it fills up and then it's released into the storm system. And it goes downstream eventually to the wastewater treatment plants, and then it goes to the river. You getting a badge with this?
Just wanting good questions. All right, I want to thank you so much for coming. Folks, I did leave my business card, or if you'd like to email anyone else on council, I'm sure they would be happy to answer your question as well.
You have my contact information. I really like talking to anyone who wants to talk about this. And as the project progresses, you might have more questions about, I don't know, pedestrian safety, bike riding, signage, anything like that. I'm happy to kind of have a discussion at any time.
It's not really a question. It's just for council, I've been being a developer here. I live very close to Factory 52. I also happen to live very close to Sunville. So whatever becomes of that, we will also see what we saw with Factory 52. For council and for developers, I think it's important to put in consideration the question about water is very important, but also pest control. Not only in taking the space down, but in maintaining it. The residents locally deal with that, especially the homeowners. People who do rent apartments, unless it's directly in your unit, you're not taking care of it, and that's usually just out of, frustration. We're taking care of the responsibility that is the pests that come from the buildings, of the taking down and the building up, and then having the residents there and the retail there. I have many times communicated with MSD too, because it is a sewer issue and the excess water becomes a problem. So those are things I think the city needs to dig deeper into in these conversations.
I can let you know if you do notice rodent activity, which I'm very sorry. We actually had an issue in our house a few years ago. It was horrifying. I'm still traumatized by it. But when there's construction, yes, the rats come out. And I was just going to say, but you can let the Board of Health know because they can put traps in the sewers. That's not the only thing we can do for sure, but I just wanted you to know that that is a thing that we can do like immediately.
Just
is trap.
understand that this isn't, it is compacted by construction. Construction is not the only thing. When you are constructing on top of the infrastructure as it is, you're just like shaking out the old, okay? So already dealing with it. I lived here during the flood too. That exasperated it. You're building things, it's adding to it. So these are just things I'm asking council to consider and developers to consider as well for not only as they're taking down and building, but as they're maintaining their properties because it is an issue in this city. And then my only other comment too is to start considering the future. They're sitting right there in front of you. I haven't seen one thing developed for this community for children in a very long time. And you have retail that is lovely, but I'm not taking them to any of the bars in any of the city. And those are 3 of my 5. Factory 52 is real fun, but it's a holiday because that's what it costs, okay? You need to consider your people that are gonna grow up this city with your retail and with your spaces. And think about that because at least some part of what we still do offer for these children is put on or help paid for by some of the retail or business owners in this community. And as that group becomes smaller and smaller because we're just filling in apartments, then there's no one to provide for the youth in that capacity either. They're just things that need to be considered.
Can I follow up, Ms. Hoover? Sure. Just great comments. Awesome. Yeah, I wanted to clap. What a great comment. But followed up on the rat situation. If you do have situation where you see them coming out of the sewers, MSD does have a program. You can call them. They will help you with that. If you can, what they'll want you to do is document it. And if you can prove that they're coming from the sewers, they will trap and help you with that. They do want you to document that though. But great comment. As I grew up here in Norwood, I'm 53 years old and I started off right here. And, we had the Fun Factory and we had, Showbiz Pizza Place. We had all these great things for the youth, man. I think I wanted to stand up and clap. That is an outstanding comment. And I think that's exactly what we need to be focused on.
Something needs to be done, or the community will not, right?
Yeah, great. Thank you for that, ma'am.
It takes the children to do it.
Both of my sons went through Scouts, and I appreciate you guys being here today. I know our mayor has several children that went through Scouts together, and I appreciate you guys being here today.
All right. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. And again, reach out if you have any questions and spread the information and look forward to seeing folks again soon. Thank you. And we are done I'm adjourning the meeting. Look at that.